there's an exceptional number of men that are languishing and not flourishing due to self-reliance and isolation. And I think one of the ways in which we change this is we offer alternate but godly narratives through other men's stories where we go, oh, I can relate to that.
Well, it seems like so many, especially non-believers, see when you say, well, what's the church? I say, well, it's that building over there that has a bunch of people. No, it's a table of people that God chooses to love exactly where they are, but loves them too much to let them stay there. Welcome back to the MakeReady Podcast. My name is Brian Sims, and today I'm joined by my good friend Chad Warren. Chad grew up without a father, chasing toughness and the Navy SEAL ideal, only to find emptiness. God gave him a new identity through community and faith, and today we talk about rejecting false masculinity and finding true worth in Christ. If you enjoy this conversation, click the like and follow buttons so you never miss an episode. If you want to support our mission, there's a link in the description below. This is the MakeReady Podcast. Chad Warren. It's a pretty good looking hat.
It's a good hat.
Yeah, for all the people just listening on audio. That's a really good looking hat.
If you're on audio, you may want to switch over, toggle to video, go to YouTube, just to see the hat.
just for that purpose.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So you're in town.
In
This
town.
is awesome.
Yeah.
From the great north.
Great north of Montana, from the mountains and the valleys.
Yeah. My context of north doesn't go past Oklahoma.
Well,
So,
some people think
it's good to
Montana looks like West Texas, but it doesn't. Not all of it.
not where
Some
you're
of
from. Not where you're from.
Yeah.
You're stone's throw from Glacier.
it. Yeah, right by Glacier Park, right in the Flathead Valley, named after the Flathead Indians that were first residents there.
That's where you're from, right?
Mm-hmm. Born and raised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your story?
In a nutshell, my story consists of early on, probably about a month before I was born, my father left the picture. So my biological father left. He had come back from Vietnam, a pretty broken individual, and was dealing with a lot of substance and trying to figure some things out.
It's a really common story.
Yeah, and couldn't piece it together. I think wrestled with a lot of kind of internal questions and societal questions, but anyway, in the context of our family, he couldn't get it figured out, and so ended up leaving the picture right before I was born. So I didn't grow up with him around. I have an older brother who's from my mom's first marriage, and so it was just kind of the three of us. He's quite a bit older than me, 10 years older, and so he was the person that I looked up to and kind of aspired to be like. He left the house after he graduated, went on to the Navy, and while he served in the Navy, he kind of introduced me to the concept of the elite warriors, the Navy SEALs. And so then I started to develop this caricature of manhood around, that's what it means. That's, if I can do that.
Like elite physical expression
Yes.
of power.
And just guys that can walk in any room and handle their business and everyone respects them. And that was a big thing that I thought, if I can attain to that, then I will be respected by all the people that I care to be respected by. And, looking back at the time, I didn't have those categories. I didn't know that's what I was doing. But essentially, when I kind of reflect on it, that's really what I wanted. I wanted respect. And I didn't know the Lord. I didn't grow up in a household that prioritized Jesus necessarily. There were aspects where we would attend church irregularly. We would kind of learn the Lord's Prayer and kind of some of those basic things, I think, that helped establish somewhat of a moral framework, but certainly not a priority and did not define my life or decision-making, wasn't my worldview. So was kind of in hot pursuit of that career path. Wanted to pursue that, wanted to go into the Navy. Somewhere in high school, it was kind of a multi-stage process where I met the Lord. I'd been sent to this summer camp that wasn't a Christian camp. It was a leadership camp for student council. I went to the public school. So I went to this leadership camp, and our cabin counselor happened to be a Christian who I think it kind of took some risk and knew, okay, I'm not supposed to talk about this, but I'm going to. So he preached some of the scariest things I'd ever heard of, like this place called hell. I was terrified of that. He described it, and he said, to avoid that outcome, say these words. So I said the words that you're supposed to say, prayed the prayer.
The magic.
Yeah. And I remember praying that prayer probably 7 or 8 times, emphasizing different words.
Just to make sure.
Yeah, I didn't know if it took. I didn't know if I said the incantation correctly. And so I remember saying it over and over, and then left that experience. That was in 7th grade. Went into 8th grade, no functional difference in my life. Did not operate, didn't live different, didn't have any desire for the Lord, for Christ, had no relationship. I knew that what I had done was, if that place he had described was real, I had done what he told me I needed to do in order to avoid it. But that was all I was interested in. It was
the insurance.
Just still very self-focused, self-preservation. And so then I just continued on the trajectory of just kind of a hyper masculinity of, I'm going to be tough. I'm going to party harder than everyone else. I'm going to be tougher than everyone else. Physically, I was a wrestler growing up. I was just going to go bigger, faster, stronger than others so that I could pursue that outcome of becoming a Navy SEAL and being deeply respected. And then our family moved from Colorado in the middle of high school. I was pulled from everything that I was familiar with, all of my roots, all of my friends, all sense of normalcy, and we moved to Colorado. So then I started out in a new school. I was the new kid, and with all that comes with that, the people, they've already got their friend groups developed and all that kind of thing. And I remember there was a group of people that were unusually friendly towards me, and I didn't necessarily kind of identify with them, but they were always really kind and inviting me to hang out with them at this thing at their church. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll go. It also helped that I was attracted to one of the girls that kept inviting me. So, the Lord uses whatever he has to. And I ended up going to this youth group event and started to hang out with them on a weekly basis. I wouldn't miss it. I kept going there. There was something about them that was different and drew me into this community and this group of friends that were super accepting and were interested in me.
And did you have no idea why they were just different?
Well, what I didn't know why they were different, but what I had rationalized at the time was I went to that camp and I prayed that prayer, so I think I'm in.
Yeah, I think I'm one of them.
So I'm one of them.
Yeah.
But they were different than me. They were selfless for the most part. Mm-hmm. They didn't really care what I had accomplished or what I could do or if I could benefit them or if I was popular. They didn't really care.
Just like a different quality.
And I just didn't know, but it was so genuine. I thought, man, I like being around these people. And so still trying to maintain and build and develop kind of this facade of success in the public school system and athletics and academics. And so still did that, but hung out with them. And so spent a year with them. They invited me to go on this mission trip. And I'm like, what is that? And they said, we're going to go tell people about Jesus. And we're going to do this vacation Bible school. I'm like, well, what does that consist of?
I heard vacation. That
so I got to go on a trip? So I'm trying to convince my mom I want to go on this trip. And
it's a you want to go on vacation? No, Bible school. Yes.
Yeah.
Emphasize the Bible school
and
part.
The catch was they were going from Colorado and they were going to do this vacation Bible school in Montana. And it was going to happen to be about an hour and a half south of where I grew up. And I thought, man, that gets me back home. And so I started to make arrangements with my friends that, hey, I'm coming back to Montana this summer. And I was making these plans to stay there the rest of the summer. I was going to get my old lifeguarding job that I had at the pool. And so I was aligning like places I could stay over the summer. And I kind of hadn't told my mom about all these plans that I was making. And I just told her, I'm going to go on this mission trip with these youth group kids. She's like, okay. And then I told her, yeah, and I think I'd like to stay up there the rest of the summer. She said, absolutely not. Well, come on. She said, no, you need to come home when they come home. And I'm like, okay. But in my mind, I had fought that the whole time, and I was still planning for a buddy to come pick me up on the last day of the mission trip. I was going to hop in the car and go with him. And I go on this trip, and through a couple of different conversations and events, in the middle of this mission trip one night, kind of beginning to process all of the stuff that we had been talking about and teaching, and recognizing that I wasn't sure I had fully subscribed to this, and started to feel really guilty about that, because if God existed, I was simply playing church, and I wasn't sure what that meant between he and I, that I'm hanging out and I'm being around him, but I don't really know him, nor I don't like him or dislike him, but I'm if he's real, I'm pretty scared of him. So I started to get really uneasy about that I don't have a relationship with this guy, and so he has no reason to like me or to let me into his heaven. So I don't know how this is actually going to play out. And so I started to get just really heavy with that reality, and wanted to kind of seek some answers on that. My older brother had given me a Bible months before this, and so I brought that with me and thought maybe there'll be some answers in this book. I remember just cracking it open and not sure where to even look or begin. And in walks our youth pastor. His name is Derek. And Derek says, hey, Chad.
It's a good youth pastor name.
Yeah, perfect. He had a goatee.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Chad too. Chad's another good youth pastor name.
Yeah, but you can't, youth pastors, He fit the part, and he played the role well. God used him mightily. And he started asking questions like, hey, what's going on? And what he had indicated is that he had recognized in the moments prior to that I was really struggling. And he identified that God had made him aware. And I don't know how all that worked, but he said, God made me aware that you were really struggling with some things. And so do you have some questions? And in that moment, I was deeply affected by the thought that God, that he would care enough to indicate to Derek that I'm struggling and send Derek to me in that simple act. So I wasn't really listening to what Derek was saying at that point, but what he had told me, how he had arrived in where I was sitting, indicated that God was personal, God was real, God cared, and he wasn't mad at me. And it broke me. I was broken. And I, for the first time, began to experience the unbounded love of God towards me. And I didn't know what to do with it. And I didn't know how to respond, because I was also, at the same time, mutually aware of, I do not deserve this. I'm completely a scumbag and broken. Why would he care? He doesn't owe me anything, and I certainly don't deserve it, because I had been operating up until that point on this sense that I need to generate reasons for people to respect me. And deep down I knew there are no reasons for that. I'm not a respectable person. I know my heart. I know what I'm capable of. I know what I'll do if I was allowed to do the things that I've imagined. There's no way.
Yeah.
And so I was a broken person, and at the same time kind of held this mutual understanding and increasing understanding of Christ's love for me. So he started to walk me through who Christ was, and had no conversations about hell. I was fully aware that's where I was going. And then he started to express this amazing free love that God had clearly indicated that he wanted me to be in relationship, and it had nothing to do with me. And so that began, I became a disciple of Jesus in that moment.
Was this like a moment? Like,
it was
over the
moment.
weekend, or this is like a moment?
Yeah, it was over probably the course of an hour that this all transpired. A mutual friend of ours was there, Brandon Booth.
Oh yeah.
He came in. He was a senior in the youth group that was there, and he sat down with me and kind of walked with me through that time as well. And so then I woke up the next day, and I was just full of joy, excitement, and kind of had this understanding that we're going to do things God's way now. And life's different. And so I have a new set of how I operate, and the primary relationship that I need to address is the one with my mom. And I had been extremely disrespectful to her, the way I talked to her face, behind her back, all of these ways, just totally mean and disrespectful to my mother. And I was immediately like, I can't do, that's not how this works anymore. So I call her up, and this is back when we had phones attached to wires that were attached to the wall. And I dialed her up and said, "Hey, Mom, the mission trip's going great. Things are going well, but I need to let you know that I met Jesus last night. And so he's like the boss now, and I'm going to do things his way. And I want to honor you. And I've been really disrespectful to you and mean and unloving. And I want to ask for your forgiveness. And if you don't want me to stay in Montana, I will happily come home." And it was quiet. And all I heard her say was, "Well, it sounds like this has been a good trip. You could use some time with your friends in Montana. Why don't you stay up there? We'll figure out a way to get you home at the end of the summer." So then I'm thinking, this is great. When you follow Jesus, everything works out. Like all the desires of my heart are going to come true. This is great. Everything I want. And obviously I learned contrary to that. But I did learn that as you start to do things his way, that's how he shapes you into the image of his son. It's not this external thing that just magically happens to you. It's when and as you walk in obedience to his design, he actually changes you into the image of his son. That's what we would call theologically sanctification. So okay, now I'm a Christian. I'm in high school. I still want to be a Navy SEAL. And so I keep praying that God would give me that. And I pray and I pray and I pray. I apply for the U.S. Naval Academy. I go through the nomination process, get a nomination, get all the way up until the last cut, and then I get cut from the Naval Academy process. So then I go into ROTC, wanted to pursue that, really thought that I was going to go do that. So I go to Oregon State, go to their ROTC program, Naval ROTC. I'm all gung-ho, doing really well in the program. But by the end of that year, the Lord did a lot of work in me and through me as I spent time in his word with a community of believers in a campus ministry, and then continuing conversations with my youth pastor, Derek. And it became clear that that's not what God designed me to do. That was what I wanted to do in order to achieve and generate and manufacture a respect for myself. But that's not what he wanted. And because I didn't need the approval of man anymore, I was kind of released from that. And I thought, oh, what do you want me to do, God? If you've taken care of all the deepest desires of my heart, which is to be loved and respected, what do you want me to do? And he affirmed through a couple of different avenues that he wanted me to go into full-time preaching, teaching, pastoral ministry. So then I'm at Oregon State. What do I got to finish. So I finish.
Where'd that affirmation come from? Like, how did God present that to you? And you're like, yes, that is God's. It came through.
So Derek was one of those that kind of indicated.
Oh, I need to meet Derek.
He's a good guy. Awesome. He's still pastoring a church in a very small town in Colorado, southeastern Colorado. He affirmed some things, and then I had recognized. So one of the things that I did in high school, one of the clubs I was a part of was forensics and speech and debate. And I was very successful. I ended up going to nationals and competing one state and did.
Somehow that does not surprise me.
So I had recognized that I have an ability to speak and articulate. So how do I use that for the Lord? So there was some of that. And then I was starting to lead some Bible studies and had a voracious appetite for the word and just loved to read the word for myself and apply it. And then I found I really love to help others get it so they can live it. Like, this is so fun. And recognize that that's what pastors do. Like, you mean I could do this full time? Okay, sign me up. So I pursued that and finished at Oregon State. And then Brandon Booth, who had been there the night that I became a follower of Christ, invited me to join him in the summer and staff with this organization called Worldview Academy. So I'm like, what? Worldview what? Well, what had been happening and the way God had been working upstream is I was a philosophy major at Oregon State, and now that I'm a Christian, I take very seriously how other worldviews and religions compare to Christianity, and discovered this avenue of Christian theology known as apologetics, and how you contend for the faith, give a case for Christ. How do you articulate and rationalize the validity of Christianity and also see the invalidity of these other worldviews? So I was off into books and reading, and he tells me about this camp that you get to go in the summers and hang out with high school students and help them with these same questions and process and equip them. And I thought, that is amazing. So I went. I said, absolutely. So I became a summer staffer. The next year I came back, I was leadership staff. The next year, Randy Sims saw something in me and said, hey, I want you to come and you're going to be a director for us. So then I left, graduated Oregon State with a degree in philosophy, and was one of the few philosophy majors that probably actually used their degree. And
not in the way that probably the professors at Oregon State wanted you to.
Exactly. And so I went to camp and I got to teach and direct camps for several years.
Yeah.
And then they were headquartered in kind of the South Central Texas area. And the woman who would become my wife was there working at a summer camp as well as a women's director. And we were going to the same church and kind of had some mutual friends. And so we connected through the camp she was working at, and met, fell in love, and got married. And then after that, the Lord called me up to Colorado, and I was as an associate pastor, youth pastor at a church there. We were there for a little while, several years. Our first two kiddos were born there, Truett and Jane. And then the Lord called us out to Yale University, worked with an organization called Christian Union, and was a ministry fellow at Yale, and got to launch a campus ministry there where fall semester when we started, we had 6 students. And then at the end of my 3 years there, we had 150 students, Yale undergraduates, actively involved in discipleship and
That's cool. What does
Bible
it mean
courses.
What does it mean to be a ministry fellow at Yale?
Yeah, so working with the organization Christian Union, my assignment was to Yale University undergraduates, and so I worked with them.
Officially for the university?
No, kind of as a partner or alongside
Gotcha.
of, but not in an official capacity with Yale. But we would work with the Yale students to kind of create a student organization that they would run. And so it was leadership development. So I'm coaching and leading and kind of helping these and discipling these students to create an organization and function in those leadership capacities, and then also teaching Bible courses that are deep dive courses through a book of the Bible each semester, and equipping them with the skills to be self-feeders in the Word, but wanted to offer a heightened theological biblical experience that was on par with the other academic experiences they were having in the classroom, which was a little bit different model than a lot of other campus ministries.
That's cool. Is that still going?
It's still going.
Love it.
Yeah. It's on all the Ivy League campuses, and then it includes Stanford now. They have Christian Union expressions. So we were there for a few years, and then and that's where our third and final son, Titus, was born in Yale University Hospital. And then spent some time in classical Christian education, teaching, but always had that pastoral bent and desire to be in the local church, because I think that is the locus of God's presence on planet Earth. I think that he has decided that he is going to function through his body in order to affect change. And so when people question, well, why isn't God more present in the world? Why isn't he more visible? Why is he so hidden? Well, he is determined that he's going to be visible in and through the local church and through the corporate body of the church. And so if Christians aren't bearing his image, then he's not going to be very visible, and he's going to seem hidden in culture. So the responsibility we have to embody and bear his image as we walk in obedience with Christ, his Spirit empowers us and leads us and unifies us, well, then he becomes more visible on planet Earth.
I love that. And if we are not visible, he will allow us to live in a culture that is reaping the consequences of that.
And he will remain hidden. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Gosh, isn't that the truth? Kalispell, Montana.
Yeah.
That's an ugly place.
I know. No one should go there. It's not a fun place. Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay, so how public is your education?
So
right
I'm
now?
in pursuit of a doctoral degree,
Okay.
and my particular area of research is in response to the realization that there is an exceptional number of men in our area. When I say our area, the Pacific Northwest, Montana, the North, but I think also within the United States, it's also true. I'm confining my research to my region, but I think it's very applicable broadly, and that is there's an exceptional number of men that are languishing and not flourishing directly due to self-reliance and isolation. And we could get into all of the factors that I think are contributing to that, but the reality is an exceptional number of men, not just like an average, but more than in history, are languishing and not flourishing. And so my desire is to really unpack kind of the philosophical, psychological, historical, political, economic, and spiritual influences and contributors to that. And then how do we respond to that? What are the next steps for us as a church to respond to that?
Gosh, when we started talking about this, I don't know, a year ago, I think is when we got on the phone.
Yeah, about a year.
Just, oh my gosh, we're thinking along the same ways. And
so much so that I said, you need to make a hat.
Yeah. And you
said,
show
well,
up here.
why don't you make the hat? So I made the hat, sent you some, and now I'm wearing it. Here it is.
Oh my gosh. What I love about this, you doing this up in Montana, is that it's such a microcosm. And it's far more visible because it's a microcosm.
Yeah.
And acute in that world. And so if it can be understood and figured out there, I feel like that is portable, like you said, to all kinds of other places because it is so prevalent in the church. And it's there's not necessarily somebody you can point to whose fault it is, because ultimately it's the hearts of men that are broken.
Right.
It's not pastors that are not doing their job. It's not churches that are not doing their job, although they are filled with men who are going through the same thing.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right in that it's not a new issue. It is the heart of men. It goes back to Genesis 3. It began in the garden, this self-reliance and isolation and this stiff arm to the God of the universe who created us for proximity to him and relationship to him. And instead of taking him at his word, instead of trusting that design, the first thing we did is question his word and allow that temptation, that question to come in and entertain that, and stopped as men exercising our rightful responsibility of leadership and exercising healthy authority in the situation, rather than expelling him from the garden, which humanity was given dominion over all of creation and the creatures. Here we have a creature that is calling into question God's word, intent, and design, rather than expel that creature.
We could have just said, go.
Exactly.
Leave.
And we had dominion, and we didn't exercise it. And so instead, we invite in this proximity problem where now we are expelled from the garden rather than the serpent being expelled. We've invited in all kinds of friction. Now our relationship with the Lord is fractured. Our relationship with our wives and humanity is fractured. Our relationship with the creation, so creatures, is fractured. Our relationship with the ground that we're to cultivate is now fractured. So everything's now broken, which will lead to languishing and not flourishing, which we were designed for flourishing. He says in Genesis 2:15 that he placed Adam and Eve in a garden to work it and to keep it, right? To cultivate the garden to flourish. And the idea that as humanity's there doing that, the thought was Eden was going to spread throughout the globe. It wasn't going to stay confined in between these rivers. It was going to expand, and the intent was flourishing throughout by image bearers of God who had been deputized for this creation project. And we failed in Genesis 3. So we know the source. And what we're finding throughout history, there's been creative ways in which humanity has continued to create that distance and stifle any kind of proximity between us and him. And so you see throughout the scriptures that this is clearly what God still wants. He wants us to be in close proximity, so he starts to make avenues through which we can do that. A sacrificial system, laws that are given to us that both reveal our brokenness, but also show there's going to be a way back. Just wait. You see in Psalm 1 where we see that humanity is likened to a tree that if planted by streams of living water or relying on and meditating on God's word, we will flourish in due season. Otherwise, we'll languish and our leaves will wither and die. And so there's clearly that's the problem. The problem for us is in today's world, men are languishing, and it's isolation and self-reliance that is keeping them from proximity to God in the avenues through which he's created us for, through community, through the church, and through reliance on him, through Christ. And so we're convinced and we buy into a narrative that tells us we don't need those things in order to be successful. And so, yeah, that's been a big part of it. So
how much of it in men do you think is because of fear?
I think fear is one of the primary drivers, and it's fear of being found out. So impostor syndrome. If I don't maintain the facade and people find out who I really am, I'm done for because I will lose their respect. And I think that's, again, a big part of it, right? Fear of losing respect, fear of losing face, fear of not earning respect. And that's what it comes down to. You see also in that early Genesis account, what happens when the consequences of the fall, as God is talking to Adam and Eve and the serpent, you see that one of the primary drivers for women is going to be love. Right? The way that pain interrupts the situation and sin affects the situation for them is that they're going to have broken relationship with their husband, and there's going to be pain involved in their ability to perpetuate what they were designed for, which is bearing fruit, bearing more images, right? That God.
Isn't just physical, it's relational.
There's a relational constraint. And then for men, the issue is going to be your ability to produce out of the ground and exercise dominion is going to be stifled. It's going to be painful. It's going to be disrupted. And so there's going to be this constant striving to make something of myself out of that ground and over these animals. And so I'm going to constantly be trying to do something so that I am valuable. Because identity, purpose, those are things that were lost in Genesis 3 when they're expelled from the garden. So we're constantly trying to figure out, who am I and am I worthwhile? Do I have value? And so those are things that can only be found in him and restored in him. And so you see it continues throughout the narrative, the Tower of Babel. What are they trying to do? It says in the text that they do the opposite of what God has told them to do. So they're furthering themselves from Eden. And instead of spreading out, ruling and subduing, they gather in one spot rather than spread. So they gather in this plain and they start building a tower. So they're trying to use technology to generate value, because it says they want to make a name for themselves so that they're not dispersed and in danger. So that they can manufacture a value for themselves, they do this. God comes down, and I think in an act of mercy and wrath, he confuses their language and spreads them out and says, no, you still don't get it. Where my image goes, people understand that's my authority, my rule, my realm. And so they're not spreading the image of God throughout the ancient world. They're trying to make a name for themselves, which is powerful, because then when you get to Acts chapter 2 and the day of Pentecost, what you see happen is in the language between Genesis 11 and the Tower of Babel and Acts chapter 2 is, in both cases, God comes down, and what he finds in Genesis 11 is he comes down, their unified language, there's no end to the evil they can accomplish, so he has to deal with it. And so he confuses their language and spreads them out. Here you have in Acts chapter 2, from around the known world, they've gathered in one spot, the Holy Spirit descends, gives them utterance, and they have the same unified language or message. They're telling the mighty works of God. And so what we see when Christ comes and gives his Spirit to the church, he's restoring what was undone in Babel. He's starting to replace and replenish in this united people that are now going to go and then spread back to their homelands and take the gospel with them. Pretty powerful.
No, it's totally that goes into something something that totally unlocked Scripture for me, to where it stopped being all of these disparate stories and just of cool things that happened that I believed in, and it wasn't a salvific thing, but God unlocked the meta narrative of how all of it is connected.
Exactly.
And all of it is pointing to the redemption of God's people.
Continuity is one of the most beautiful things. Once you see it in the Scriptures,
You can't unsee it.
And it unlocks everything.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people allow themselves or are content with this kind of discontinuity or fractured or kind of siloed understanding of what things mean and where they go, and they don't understand the continuity that's there.
Okay, here's a hot take that might stir a little controversy. Why do you think that the Bible explicitly defines sin and entering the world through Eve's action and not through Adam's inaction in that moment?
It's interesting that you separate those. I don't see them as separate engagement. I think they're simultaneously happening. I think that Adam is clearly present and non-active. Eve is clearly present and active, and I think they're simultaneously happening. So I don't think one is prior to the other. In my estimation, I think they're present at the same time, and both are happening. So why?
Because we harp on Eve.
We do. We do. But I think Adam's presence and awareness is clear, and I think it's an indication the way that God responds to sin and what he talks to Adam about was clear, that he was equally responsible, and it was a simultaneous activity. Yeah.
What happened out of his dominion.
Yep. And she was there to help him, and she's not helping because he's not leading.
Man, what are some of the consequences in our culture today that you think are a right perspective of men would solve a lot of these things that are happening?
I think one of those things would be, I think a theological or right understanding of manhood as designed and defined by God, not by us, not by culture. Understanding our role rightly and also understanding authority properly. I think we have a misunderstanding of authority, and it's typically a bad word, and we don't generally like the idea of authority. But we see throughout the Scriptures, and I think we've been designed for healthy exercise of authority, and there's certain kind of infrastructures in society. So within the family unit, I think within church, I think we see there's created spheres of authority and order that, when done rightly, in subjection to God and out of fear of God, because you talked about earlier, how much does fear play into this? I think one of the problems is we fear the wrong stuff. One of the beauties of fear that God has created us with is when we fear him, we don't have to fear anything else. It releases us from any other fear. But when we fear other things, we won't rightly fear him and respect him and honor him. And so when you get that order of fear, I think, lined up, it frees you, it releases you from fearing anything else. And you can then live for him. So I think then it creates in you an ability to exercise healthy authority. So I think authority and understanding fear is another one. I think some real practical influences on our situation would be the screen. I think whatever screen is your screen.
What people are watching this on.
Exactly. That there is a sense in which the way that we interact with or what we expect from the screen, I think is a big deal. I think it's neutral. The screen is neutral. However, when we apply ourselves to it, when we touch it, it becomes non-neutral. It's either for good or for evil, but it doesn't remain neutral. So the technology itself is a neutral platform and medium, but however we use it, it will be influenced. And I think, unfortunately, and there's some research, a lot of research out right now that looks at the ways in which, like social media, for instance, influences and has had such a negative effect on society, specifically teens, and the way that it and the why it affects teens so differently. So females and males are affected very differently. There's a sense in which the research is showing that the way that women interact with social media is to generate relational connectivity, but it's superficial relational connectivity. And they're wanting to be connected so that they can experience and feel loved. But it's superficial, and so it's not actual, and it doesn't actually satiate what they want. Men, on the other hand, are not looking for connectivity. They're looking for achievement. So when they interact with social media or online gaming or anything like that, there's this desire to have achieved something. So I would say even like fantasy sports, and I may tick a lot of people off, but I think there's something in that where if we approach it wrongly, we're trying to generate an achievement so that we can have respect that we've earned and rightly receive, but it's not actual achievement. When I play Madden 25 or whatever, and I win the Super Bowl in that game, I haven't actually accomplished something that's tangible or really matters in the scheme of things. But I feel this false dopamine hit that I've achieved something.
That's addictive.
And then and so it's this ongoing issue of now I need to get it again and again. So I think that there's that false sense of achievement, false sense of relationship that are so detrimental to us. And so we have this false sense of connection with other people that's not actual. And I think that's a part of that's feeding this lie and the narrative that we can be isolated and self-reliant, and that's good enough for us to achieve success. And I think it's a myth. One of the things that that I've appreciated in this line of research is identifying this term rugged individualism and recognizing that it's essentially a myth. It's not an actual thing, but it's a narrative that I think our culture likes to perpetuate and we find it attractive, but it's not an actual reality. And so pursuing this myth and thinking that somehow we can be self-made, isolated, and worthy of respect, I think is what's killing us.
Golly. And we just assume, or we believe that it'll all go well if we do
because it does in the movies.
Well, but I mean, self-reliance, like, isn't there something good about self-reliance?
Yeah, and I think there is. I think there is this ability to be able to handle yourself and
capability
and responsibility and stewarding the resources you have in a way that honors the Lord. I think there's some of that, but always with this sense of mutual benefit. Like, I'm doing this so that I can help others and I can benefit others, and I'm taking care of my stuff so that it's kind of like the whole, we used to get the spiel on an airplane. When the air masks fall down, put yours on first so that you can help someone else, right? There's always this implied relational responsibility to others that we're losing, that I don't have a responsibility to you. You take care of you. That's your world. I don't want to infringe upon you. I'll take care of my stuff. And then at the same time, I'm going to say, I don't want to have to ask you because I don't want to be a burden to you. So I'm not going to ask you to help me with my stuff. So I better figure it out. And so what starts to happen is as your life crumbles on the inside, you're terrified to let anyone know that it's crumbling or that you need help because you need to appear like you've got it together. And so you can do that on social media. You can project this image that I've got it figured out, and inside you're terrified. I mean, you look at the statistics for the last 30 years in the United States for the highest rates of suicide. Well, you see those in the states that we would define as the most rugged, individualistic kind of states. Alaska, Montana, and Wyoming have competed for the top 3 slots every year for the last 30 years and since we've been keeping track. And so sometimes they're looking at what are the factors related to those things, elevation, sun exposure. So they're trying to find what are some of these kind of physical, contributors to it. But then you also have those are places where people go and migrate towards and are attracted to in order to get their own little space, to have their isolation, to be left alone, to exercise some of those freedoms that they want to exercise. There's social isolation that's occurring in those places where they're physically apart from other people. Like in Montana, we've got 1 million people, and we're the 4th largest, geographical state in the union. And so there's a lot of space. You can go plant yourself somewhere and not see people for a long time. And they're finding that those kind of social isolation practices are contributors to that heightened depression. And then also they talk about means to lethal ends, the access to lethal ends is more available in these places. And so there's a way that you can kind of carry this stuff out. So they're looking at all of those things that are contributing factors. And I think obviously the gospel and the church are the answer. It's how do we become approachable in that regard?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. I mean, the antidote is God's built it into community.
Yep.
He's built it into brotherhood. God looked at man and said he's not meant to be alone.
And so the challenge is, how do we get men to entertain that reality? How do we talk to our brothers about the reality that they believe and get them to consider maybe it's not all it's cracked up to be?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that my research is also kind of showing, is that we are story-formed beings. In every way, we are formed by stories, and then we generate stories, and we find meaning in other people's stories. So that's why we love movies, books. We love to...
That's why the hero's journey works.
You're right. Joseph Campbell writes this beautiful kind of exploration of the way that the hero's journey really is perpetuated throughout the generations, and it's kind of got the same cycle and the highs and the lows. And then you have Jordan Peterson coming out, and I think it was 1999. He wrote a book, Maps of Meaning. And what he identifies psychologically is that we as humans will always identify and express meaning through a map, and the map is always a story. And so we're looking for maps to follow, guides that show us what our life means, what success is, how we get there, the value of things, what kind of truck to drive, like all the stuff. We're looking at and identifying other maps that help make sense of our situation so we can figure out where we are and where we want to go. And I think one of the ways in which we change this is we offer alternate but godly narratives, maps, through other men's stories where we go, oh, I can relate to that. And perpetuating more and more stories where this is happening.
So you've done these MakeReady groups.
Yeah.
Have you seen that play out with those groups?
Well, it's been huge. Yeah.
Because it seems like that's how you do it. That's how you put men together.
I think it's one of the ways we can do it. I think, and so, yeah, what you're referencing is a very simple, and I've seen it in other places, but we just decided to apply it in our context and call these groups MakeReady groups with a similar ethos to kind of what you're doing through this podcast and all of your efforts at MakeReady. And that is this concept that in the military, the concept or the terminology, when you hear the command make ready, it's related to the situation that somebody is in a position and they have a firearm, and to make ready means I'm going to then chamber around and I am ready for the command to fire. Well, what we need to recognize is that a person that's in that situation that can receive that command and act on it, there has been a ton of training and preparation that has led to that moment that they are now prepared for that course of action. And so the idea was in these tables, and all they are, we've recruited and trained a group of men in our local church context to agree to be at a table somewhere in public the same time every week after week without fail. We don't take holidays off. We don't take summer off. And so there are diners, coffee shops, restaurants, even breweries where men will sit and they're going to be at that spot every week at the same time. And they're going to come, they're going to open up the scriptures. They're going to simply they're going to read through a passage of the scripture, and they're going to spend some time thinking on some questions. They're going to pray through it. And then they're going to do life together, and they're going to talk about, how do we live this way? How do we let this, what we just read, shape how we live? And you can skip it for 2 months and come back, and there's no harm, no foul, just low barrier to entry. And so we saw, as we launched this, with just a handful of tables, they've now grown, and it's had this influence on the women in our church where they wanted to start tables like that. They're like, what? We want to do this. So now we've got tons of churches in our valley, or tons of tables in our valley, I should say, where people are meeting, men are gathering, they come in, they don't have to go to our church. We've had now several people come to know the Christ through the tables that this group of people's meeting happens to have other people meeting in the diner, coffee shop, whatever. They come over and they're like, we see you here what are you guys doing? And they're like, you want to join us? It'd be easier if we just showed you what we're doing. So they sit down. They don't own a Bible. It doesn't matter. And so they start joining every week, and it's through the camaraderie that they're experiencing with no judgment, no expectations. You don't have to come knowing anything. And they're just going to be there. They're going to read the scriptures, let God speak, and also experience genuine acceptance with no strings attached.
That is awesome.
And it's working.
Well, it seems like so many, especially non-believers, see when you say, well, what's the church? It's, well, it's that building over there that has a bunch of people singing and doing different things. And it's to show people, no, it's a table of people that God chooses to love exactly where they are, but loves them too much to let them stay there.
Yeah.
I stole that from Todd Wagner, and I don't care because he stole it from somebody else, I'm sure. But
and that was my story, that he loved me too much to let me stay in a spot where I thought he didn't like me, and he didn't love me, and he didn't even know me. He's like, that's not who I am. And so he sent Derek to come and talk to me. I was like, whoa, okay. Yeah.
How many Dereks do you think are out there that are being super faithful? And I don't know if Derek knows.
I think there's a lot.
I think there's a lot too. And I think most of them have no idea how much of an impact
for sure.
they've had.
Like, I don't know if Derek will ever watch this podcast. That'd be cool. But he's had a profound impact on hundreds of people that are having profound impact, right? The multiplication principle. And yeah, I think there's a lot of them that have no clue the kind of impact they're having. And I think anybody who's watching this, you have no clue what a simple, you're in a coffee shop and you break open your Bible and you start reading it, and you actually look up and make eye contact with somebody and just engage with them. We have no clue what could happen because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, if only we saw the world that way. What is it? I totally don't know the number, but it's like if you talk to 8 people and they talk to 8 people and they talk to 8 people, it only takes like 10 steps before you've talked to the entire world.
Yeah, I mean, it's in that classic book, The Master Plan of Evangelism. He talks about if you met with this many people and they met with the same amount, we'd reach the whole global population in like 3.5 years or something like that. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
My numbers are way off on that, so fact check that for sure.
I'm going to fact check myself and just edit that out.
Yeah.
But so what else is going on with Chad in life? You got a graduate that's about to be
my
going
oldest
off?
is going to be a senior in high school. He's got some ambitions towards military service, but in a very different, fueled by a very different mentality than I had. He is doing it out of a sense of service and a desire to love people well and be willing to enter into a community that probably doesn't have a lot of missionary presence. And so he wants to go into kind of those dark places with people that need to know the Lord and be alongside them and be able to share the light of truth. So oldest is 17, Jane's 15, Titus is 13. So we got all teenagers.
Right in the middle of it, man.
Loving life, living in Montana. I get to be the pastor of East Haven Baptist Church, which is just the coolest. I love being a pastor, and we got a great team there and a super cool and growing church family there that I just love to be a part of. Yeah.
I love it.
I get to hunt elk. I get to hunt mule deer, whitetail. Shot a bison this year. I got to go bison hunting. It's just so cool. Yeah. I get to live in a cool space, but it's also, there's some challenges in that space as well. There's a lot of people that have very strong aversion to any organized religion or any kind of concept of God. Challenges where they claim to meet God in nature or wherever else, and so
like live and let live. And
yep. And I mean, we certainly don't experience any opposition to Christianity or to my relationship with Christ, but it's very much
that's good for you. That's good for
exactly. It's you do you, I'll do me. We're going to get along just fine.
Why do you think people like that congregate in beautiful places? Because it's that, I mean, that's been fully realized in California and Colorado, and I think that if left to its ways, would materialize in Montana.
I think because we're, like I referenced earlier with maps and meaning, I think that we're drawn to sources that give us a sense of meaning. We want to be in awe of things. We feel a connection, and I think all of those are instinctual realities of creation, that in Genesis 1 and 2, the connection that God gave us to the created world and to beauty and the way he's expressed himself through the natural order of creation and in the mountains and in those places, I think there's still that kind of DNA deep in us that finds like that. We want to be in awe of those things. And ultimately, the expression is we are in awe of him because of what he's made. And so I think it's a worship problem. I think those are places where we would naturally, there would naturally be a cultivation of worship and a desire to express that, but they don't know how to do it, so they just go enjoy it. And we're made to enjoy those things. We're made to enjoy creation. And so there's a sense in which they're doing what they were designed to do. It's just gone about all wrong.
Would you agree? Because I've had this conversation with a few people recently about how being made in the nature of God and having attributes like creativity and appreciation and all these different things that I think are, God's the ultimate creator. Like if God's the ultimate creator, we're going to want to create. Mm-hmm. And we seek to be around the most elements that are going to allow us to express that.
Like the material is there for us to work with.
Exactly.
Oh, I think that's a great insight. I think that there's that instinctual, we know we're supposed to do something with this. Kind of like when Jason Bourne, in the original Jason Bourne movie, he's like, I don't know, I can just speak Russian. And you're handing me a gun, I know exactly how to dismantle it. And I don't know. Like there's this instinctual, I know I'm supposed to do something with this and I want to. And there's just not a lot of clarity around what.
Well, I think we stop at appreciation. Like if we're looking at the mountains in Montana, the glaciers, and I think that the necessary next step is go, God, look what you made. But then you made me to look at that and go, okay, what do you want me to do with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was a creation project that he's created partners. Like he wants us to work with him on that. And I think that's what we see eventually in the book of Revelation at the end. The creation project ultimately finds its best expression in the joint activity of God and humanity. Rather than a garden, what we see at the end is a garden city. Well, a city is something from the beginning that humanity was creating cities, right? Cain went and made the first city, but he went about it independent of God, not in conjunction with God. And so this whole creation project is heading towards exactly God's plan A, which is the joint creative efforts of God and his image bearers creating together a garden city.
Sounds a lot like the hero's journey.
It is.
We got to eat. I know I'm getting hungry.
Okay.
Are you getting hungry?
Yeah.
Dude, thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah.
Let's do this again.
This is a blessing.
You need to come down here more often.
Let's do it. I'll make a pilgrimage to Dallas.
Because if I go up there, I may not come back.
But I do want to do one up there. We need to have you up there.
We'll do the whole thing. All right.
Yeah.
Chad, thank you.
Thanks, Brian.